Hey everybody, so last year, or starting at the end of 2022, I made some videos about selling on Ruby Lane, selling vintage and collectibles on Ruby Lane. And I talked about some of the misconceptions that people had about that venue and then why I actually prefer selling on Ruby Lane over selling on Etsy anymore. And I knew I wanted to do an updated video for 2024. I had gotten a few requests for that because sites do change a little bit over time. And when you're looking on YouTube for information about a venue or about a platform, then you want the most updated information. So I really hadn't rushed to do it because Ruby Lane hadn't changed a whole lot. They maybe increase the number of pictures you could have in your listing, things like that. So I knew I'd get to it, but maybe not quite so quickly. But we had a big announcement last week for Ruby Lane and a little bit of a change in their fee structure. So it's kind of a major change and it's made a lot of people reevaluate what they're doing with Ruby Lane. I'll get all into that in a bit. In the past, Ruby Lane, I actually tried selling on Ruby Lane back in 2018, and they had a different fee structure back then. They had a shop setup fee that was pretty expensive. They had like a monthly maintenance fee of like $60 or something like that. I tried it for a few months. I could not give it the time that it needed, and I just couldn't justify that monthly maintenance fee. Well, fast forward to 2021, they announced a major change in their fee structure, and it got my attention. So what they were doing was they were again charging a maintenance fee, this time $25 a month, but that maintenance fee would be waived or refunded if you listed at least 15 items in your shop in that month. So easy peasy, no problem. I opened my shop in 2021 and I have always listed at least 15 items in the month. So I haven't paid that maintenance fee. Maybe once, I don't know, maybe on a vacation month. There's also a service fee of 9.9% once an item sells. And then of course there's a payment processing fee, which is done by PayPal, which is the payment processor for Ruby Lane. So, that attracted a lot of new sellers, right? There was really no risk. You could try it out. You could start selling on Ruby Lane. You only pay a fee if it sells. And so that actually got a lot of people excited, and it got people going to Ruby Lane to try it out. So this past week, they made another announcement announcing a change in their fee structure, which is due to start June 1st. Okay, so not a lot of notice with it. So the maintenance fee is increasing from $25 to $45. And then the real kicker is that the rebate was being taken away as well. So it doesn't matter if you list 15 items, doesn't matter if you list 2 items in a month, you're going to be paying $45 a month to have a store on Ruby Lane. Now, there are no listing fees. The amount of items you can have in the store is unlimited, $45 a month, and then the service fee was not changing. So it's still 9.9%, and then the payment processing fee when you sell an item. So that was the big change, okay? So that's quite a jump. I admit you basically could go from zero. If you were somewhat active in your shop, you could go from $0 to $45 a month. So that made a lot of people pause, right? Especially newer sellers, people who had just joined Ruby Lane. They hadn't gotten maybe their shops established quite yet. Like, they haven't seen a steadiness in their sales yet to feel like they can justify such a change in the Ruby Lane fees. So I do know of some shops that right away, some other sellers said, no way, I can't do this. And they're closing their shops as we speak. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other feedback I've heard about the change. And then I just want to give you facts about Ruby Lane as a site. I'm not here to tell you one way or the other to open a Ruby Lane shop or not. If you've watched my videos at all, you know that I do sell on Ruby Lane. I sell vintage on Ruby Lane. And if you watch my What Sold videos, I generally do have sales every week from that platform. And I also, you know, the number varies depending on how much work I've put in to that platform, you know, in that week or the weeks before that. So but I'm not here, like, I don't get any kind of, they did away with the affiliate program a long time ago, so I don't get anything if you guys sign up or anything like that. So some of the reasons they gave were just the costs of everything are going up, right? So it's affecting you and me. It's affecting rent and groceries and gas, the cost of postage, the cost of packaging, like you know, I heard people say like what their accountant charges has gone up. Just, we just know it. Prices are just going up all over. It's not easy to be a reseller these days. And hopefully you don't get that idea from YouTubers. I don't ever want to give that idea. You know, we have fun talking about the stuff that's sold, but it's not an easy job, and it's gotten harder. Competition has gotten a little stiffer. So if you really love it, you'll keep with it, but a lot of people have decided that reselling just doesn't work for them. And the same thing, people may decide that this particular platform does not work for them anymore. But honestly, there are pros and cons to every platform that I sell on, and I sell on quite a few. So Ruby Lane gave rising costs as their main reason as well for having to having to increase their service fee that they charge monthly. They say their advertising costs have gone up. The cost to report and remit sales tax, which they do for us, they said that went up like 24%. Insurance premiums went up. They've upgraded cybersecurity. You know, they gave a big list of some of the costs and things that have gone up for them. And then they do have a certain number of, I'm not going to get into the details on how people do this, but I do know that there are some shops that are just operating just kind of like as a hobby, a museum. There's no listing fees, there's no renewing fees, so they're just kind of parking their stuff. Maybe they're listing the 25, I don't know, the 15 items, so they don't have to pay the $25, but basically Ruby Lane is carrying them, and then they're finding ways to evade selling online. Maybe they're taking their sales offline. They're not finalizing their sales, so the whole sales tax thing gets more complicated. Anyway, I'm not going to get into the things that, you know, sometimes a smaller group of sellers just kind of change things for the rest of us. So they do have some costs that they're dealing with. So I get it. I'm not surprised. Some feel that they saw this coming, that there was going to be a maintenance fee of some sort coming up in the near future. Anyway, so some of the feedback I just wanted to go into. I'm going to share my plan and my feedback at the end, what I think about the whole thing. I have, you know, the most negative response I've seen in different groups or different, you know, chat groups about Ruby Lane comes from the newer sellers. And it totally makes sense. You know, they've maybe not have established a following yet. It is a smaller site, and it does take a little bit to get some traction. I was fortunate enough, maybe because I opened during pandemic and just reselling in general was doing really good. Compared to the last year or so. But anyway, I felt like I got traction pretty quickly. You know, some are just hobby sellers who are feeling a little negative about this change. They may be just older ones on a fixed income, and they were just doing this to supplement their, you know, money that they get every month. And so $45 a month would be a big chunk for them to be paying if they're only making a couple $100s a month anyway. So that's totally understandable, and you could see why they're not thrilled with this change. Others felt like it could have been done a little more softly. It could have been done, they could have kept it at 25 and maybe dropped the rebate, and then all we'd be paying is 25. There was just different ideas. A lot of people object to like the time of year because sales are just slow. Spring and summer, it's kind of rough for reselling in general. And so they thought maybe, it's kind of insult to injury when sales have slowed down to then have to add a fee on top of it. But other venues have changed things in fourth quarter, and people complain about that too. Right? So I don't know. Some things I just don't think you're ever going to, a venue's ever going to win. Now, other feedback I read, admittedly, are from more established sellers. They felt that this was overdue, that it was coming. They knew it was coming. I have a friend who sells only on Ruby Lane and totally supports herself just with her Ruby Lane shop. And her expression that kind of caught me was that she said she would rather the fees go up than the whole site go under, right? So if they've got these expenses, just like all of us, and they're carrying sellers who are not pulling their weight, and they end up going under, then we're all sunk, right? Like we're all forced out back to some of these other sites where we can sell our vintage. So she just decided that she was going to increase the price of her items by $2. So hopefully not enough to like scare off a buyer. If they weren't going to buy, if $2 makes or breaks them, then they're probably not the right buyer for her item anyway. And her cost of each item, she doesn't sell only high-end things. She has a nice mix of, her average selling price is quite normal, $30, $35. But she said if she just added the $2 to each item, it also covers, not just the fee increase, but also like the cost of packaging that's gone up and yada, yada, yada. So now granted, she has a big store. She supports herself with this shop. So she has a big store and she's listing and selling hundreds of items in this shop every month, right? So that extra $2 on the items that sell will definitely offset any increase that's going to happen. Other people, also the feedback I got was that they felt $45 a month was still fair. It's for unlimited listings, no listing fees, no renewal fees, no crazy offsite ad fees that, Etsy came up with, where all of a sudden people are getting an extra whatever it is, 18% or something like that if the buyer finds their ad offsite, like from Google. And they feel that it's worth paying that $45 a month for such a curated site that focuses on vintage, focuses on antiques, collectibles, things like that, and doesn't let in all the fake vintage from China and isn't distracted by handmade items, things like that. So it's a curated site. They feel that $45 is more than fair. Now, if you compare it, so eBay does have a store fee as well. If you want to have a store, you can have 1,000 items. And if you pay eBay, like you commit to the year on eBay, then it's $21 a month to have 1,000 items. If you go up to the next level, it's $70 a month to have 10,000 items. So you still have a limit. Admittedly, not everyone's going to reach that point, but it is still $70 a month. Now, granted, eBay does have a bigger audience, it has a bigger reach, but it also has more competition. So all these things need to be thought about. They need to be balanced out, and you need to see what works for you and for your type of vintage that you list. So I'm just going to go through right now. Anyway, so you can see there was a variation of feedback or reaction to the news, right? Like I said, the main issues are with the smaller sellers. And so, yeah, there's, smaller or newer, I should say. Now, just because someone is new doesn't mean they necessarily have to jump ship or whatever. They could keep trying it and see see if they can make it work. But if you're new to Ruby Lane, now we've kind of been talking about it as if, you know, like maybe you had been thinking about it, or maybe you didn't even, you know, you've never considered Ruby Lane as a selling venue. Now, if I'm not going into as great a detail in this video as I've done in the videos last year, a lot of the information on those videos is still good, like how to open your shop and how to make a listing. Like I said, a few things changed the format of like the number of photos allowed and things. And then the one video about why I left Etsy to go to Ruby Lane. The information at the beginning about the fees obviously is no good anymore. So, but there's a lot of other information in there that if you care to share or care to delve into it a little bit deeper, you still can. And if there's any requests, leave me a comment down below. If there's any requests for more information about Ruby Lane as a selling site, I can definitely do another video that's kind of a little bit more updated. So just a few facts or things to think about if you are considering Ruby Lane, and have not just said, well, forget it, $45, I'm not paying that. Okay, so in order to sell on Ruby Lane, you have to apply. You have to apply to open up a shop. And that can be a good thing. That means that not just anybody can come on and start selling things that are not vintage. You apply by showing 10 items that kind of represent the vintage that you're going to be selling. You make 10 listings. They can see that you know how to take pictures. You know how to show all sides of your item in the photos and take a photo of the mark. They can see that you know how to describe your item and display the flaws and things like that. So they want to kind of see how you are as a reseller, but don't be intimidated by that. If you have any experience in reselling, you'll be fine. It does keep the site curated. Like I said, it keeps it more of a narrow focus on just vintage. You know, eBay is everything. Vintage definitely does sell on eBay. This is just if that interests you, it's just a more tightly curated site. And again, the focus is on the vintage. It's not like on Etsy, we were always kind of like the stepchild, right? So they focused on the handmade so much that they hardly marketed the vintage at all. And so like I still did okay selling on Etsy for a long time. But it's just nice to have a site that just focuses on vintage, and that's what they do. So it is a smaller company. It's, not got a huge staff or anything like that. Customer service has always been super responsive if I've needed them, and I've not really needed them very much. So the flip side of that, though, is that some people do feel that they're a little old-fashioned. There is no selling app for Ruby Lane. What I've done, and what a lot of sellers do, is you find Ruby Lane, you sign into it on your phone in the browser, and then I just set a shortcut on my page, and so I can just click, I can click an icon on the front of my phone and the shortcut, and I can go straight to my Etsy shop. Did I just say Etsy shop? You guys know what I meant. Ruby Lane shop. And I can do everything on there that I can do on desktop. So I load my photos through that and then finish the listing on my desktop, just like I do with my eBay listings and my VENDOO listings and all that kind of thing. So I know an app it's just very expensive to develop, and they're a small company, and I don't see that coming in the near future. Next thing, return policy. They have a return policy that's set by the site. It's site-wide. The buyer has 3 days from the time they receive the item to request a return. Once you've approved the return or not, if you've approved the return, then they have to ship it back within 3 days. So it's a short return window, and it also puts accountability on both sides, the buyers and the sellers. And the buyer pays to have the item shipped back. Now, I'm sure that would change, like say if, you know, if your item was completely not as described, I think that's something you would just work out with your buyer. I have had one return request since 2021. I want to say, and then I approved the return, and then she never shipped them back. It was a couple of pieces of jewelry. So I don't know what happened after that. So maybe she just didn't do it within 3 days or something like that. Or she changed her mind and just kept the pieces of jewelry. So a lot of people don't like not having control over a return policy, but that is part of selling on Ruby Lane. Feedback is not really a big part of the site. They do have a feedback system, but it's done by a third party. It's done by Trustpilot. And honestly, I forget to look half the time at my reviews. I've looked and they're not, I think on Trustpilot, it's not really, it's kind of weird because it's not really linked to an item number. And so half the time I don't even know what the feedback is for, like what item the feedback is for. So we don't have all the drama about feedback like we do on some of the other sites. So that's just, you know, the basic information about Ruby Lane. What I thought I would do is, oh wait, nope, there's more I wanted to say about it. As I said, it is a smaller site. There is a smaller audience, but they do tend to be more loyal. A lot of the people who shop on Ruby Lane only shop on Ruby Lane. And so they kind of keep an eye out for anything new that's listed. Like every day they're checking to see new stuff that's being added. So it being a smaller site, not having quite the reach as some of the bigger venues. I don't know. Some people like it. Some people like just kind of that small, more intimate type site and getting to know your customers a little bit better, things like that. But that's another complaint that I hear from people is that they don't spend enough. Like they have advertising, but they feel like they're not very good at it. Like they have some social media presence, but they're just not impressed with the content. Maybe because it's an older crowd that runs it. I don't even know. I don't even know who the people are, honestly. And so, you know, people are like, you know, nobody's ever heard of Ruby Lane. Like, how am I going to sell anything on there? I don't know. I sell stuff on there. So it's hard to explain, but I was like at a thrift store here in Montana, and I heard a lady talk about, they were looking at dishes, and I think the woman wanted more dishes, and she's like, you should look on Ruby Lane. And I was like, see, some people know about Ruby Lane. So anyway, okay. And they do optimize their listings for Google. So I do Google searches. I see results in Ruby Lane all the time. So I know our listings do show up on Google. That's always a bonus, and we don't have to pay extra for it. So you do have to work your shop. You have to list consistently. You might have to do some of the promoting yourself, get some of your items out onto social media, things like that. But honestly, I do not know of a site right now that you don't really have to do that. I mean, eBay has a huge audience. I don't really promote my stuff on social media on there. I would love things to sell faster, but that has a lot to do with what you're choosing to buy and sell. So every site is going to take some work, right? You have to be consistent. You can't just list it and forget it. I definitely have more repeat buyers on Ruby Lane, people who I think check my shop kind of regularly to see what comes up, maybe even subscribe to see as new listings come out. So what I thought I'd do right here is just take you over to do a quick tour. If you've never seen Ruby Lane before, I can just show you a few quick things. Like I said, I'm not going to get as in-depth about Ruby Lane in this video as I did in those last videos. Here we go. That's better. Okay. Anyway, I think if you want to see the price of my sold items, you're going to have to be signed in. You can make an account that's just like a buyer account. Like applying to sell is a different a whole different process. And you usually find out pretty quickly. I think when I first applied to sell, I found out within a day or so whether I was approved or not. Okay, so this is my shop, Pish Posh Vintage. Like I said, there's kind of a scrolling banner across the top. Here are my newly listed items. I have it sorted for most recent. So in my shop, so these are the items I have listed right now. And then if you go all the way down, as you can see, I do a variety of vintage. And I have it set to the biggest amount, like 180. That's why it's taking me so long to get to the bottom. And I don't want to make you sick. So if I go to page 3, that's not quite the end. Let me get to the bottom again. But as you can see, my solds are here. So my solds start on page 3. And page 4 and page 5 would be the rest of my solds. So your solds get pushed to the end of your store. And as you can see, the variety of some of the things I've sold. This isn't the order they sold in. These are in the order of how I listed them. Once they're marked as sold, they kind of get put into this order, I think, of when they were listed. So as you can see, jewelry, but then a random Howdy Doody mug, kitchen utensils, some decor items, playing cards. You see a lot of jewelry because I'll list a bunch of jewelry at once. And so, like I said, once these are sold, they're getting plugged back into the order that I listed them. So that's why you kind of see those things together. So if you go to here, okay, I'm going back to my 3rd page. So these are my oldest listings, and I could spend some time. I know I need to go into some of these, weed them out. I need to go in and maybe fix my shipping. I think I have some shipping issues on a couple of them. And I am just getting down to my most recent solds. Nope, I'm not doing most recent because, like I said, so these are the items that I had sold that were listed probably the most recently, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's what a shop looks like. Let me pop open a listing, but I want to do like one of my more recent listings. So I'm going to go back to page 1 and I'll just show you what a listing looks like. So let's look at this Avon brooch. And Ruby Lane does remove the background for you on your main image because they want the look of the site to be very consistent, but you can choose in your shop, you can choose the background color that it replaces. So I chose a background color that was kind of similar to my regular background color for a lot of my listings from my studio. So here's how the pictures appear now. We've got our title over here. We've got the item details, and then here are some of the item specific type things that are optimized for Google. You can have a little blurb that is really easy to insert into every listing. Then they do more from the seller. You can see the whole store right here. And then here's some other listings that are related to my browsing history, apparently. But then in order to find out more about the listing, like shipping, you would have to go onto the shipping. Now it's showing the shipping according to me being signed in and my zip code and things like that. And then here's your shop tools. So I can edit this page. I can manage all my items, things like that. I can edit my backgrounds, update your categories, things like that, all come from there. So let's look at the site as a whole. If I just click on the banner, this is what the main page looks like right now. Here are some of the categories across the top: collectibles, art, furniture, that kind of thing. They have just collectors hotspot, things like that. So as you can see, they want kind of a consistent look across their whole site. So they do remove the background. Like I said, it takes a day or so for the background to be removed. But you can go ahead and put things in your shop before, if you want to, before the background, the picture is finally completely processed. On the main pages, the background is always going to be white, is what they've done for their site. But like you saw in my shop, the main picture is whatever background color I want it to be for my shop. So you can shop new arrivals, and that's kind of like what I was talking about earlier. Some people come here to the new arrivals. They do most recent, and they just see what the newest things are that are available. And you can see the variety. And then what's kind of fun is same thing. You can go to the end of this, and you can go all the way over to the last page of this, and you can see the items that are new but have sold very quickly. So it kind of gives you an idea of the types of things that have sold. And so that's kind of fun to poke around in. You can also access that up here. I think it's, if you click relax. Okay, you have your what's selling. So that is just going to be kind of like what I just showed you, but just all the items that have been selling. I don't know how far back they go, but just kind of, you can play around in that. I think then maybe if it's under shop, you can go to today's arrivals or new arrivals. So today's arrivals is going to be your, the most recent things, and you can see what sold super quickly. New arrivals goes a little bit, I think is what I just showed you, right? It just kind of is some of the more recent ones, maybe a week or something like that. So as you can see, the benefit to listing daily or listing on a very regular basis, because your items will show up in this section, that some of the most faithful buyers are just looking in there daily to kind of see what new stuff is coming out. Okay, so there's been a lot of times where I list things and they sell fairly quickly, like the next, by the next day when people, when the items show up here, they might get snatched up pretty quickly. Okay. So that's kind of fun to poke around in there. Over here you go, once you have a shop, once you're a seller, you go to my shop, and all the information and things you need to access are over here. You can view your shop. That was where we started, looking at mine. You can go to shop owner's home. And so here's the things that you really need. You have your manage your items. You can go to your orders and things from here, your accounting, your shop information, turning your vacation off and on. That's where you can pick your backgrounds, things like that. And then over here, you've got promote, different ways to promote. You can set up different discounts for buyers. Like I have a repeat buyer discount. I am not going to go into everything. Here's your reports. You can pay for promoting your items, like do like a pay-per-click type thing if you want to. I've never done that. You can go to buyer's wish list, which is kind of fun. If you go there, so here's a list of items that people have favorited recently in my shop. And you can see how many people have favorited it, right? So these earrings have like four buyers who have the earrings on their wish list. That comes in handy later, like when they're running a sale or something like that. Or if you make any kind of changes on your listing, then those buyers will get notified that a change was made on the listing. So it can kind of be, helpful to know which listings are maybe getting some attention and things like that. I don't follow it completely closely, but if there's a fairly high amount of you don't want to call them watchers or people who are liking a certain item, then it usually sells not long after that. Anyway, I don't have anything scientific to prove that, so but it's always fun to kind of poke and see what kinds of things people are interested in. Then, I don't know, we just go back to my shop. That's just kind of an overview of what the site, just to kind of give you an idea of what the site looks like if you've never explored it before. As you can see, the categories up here are, you know, any kind of vintage or collectible that you can think of. And it doesn't have to be, one of the misconceptions with Ruby Lane was that it had to be fancy schmancy antiques. You could see from my solds that it ran the gamut, right? It was all sorts of different things, even just kitchenware, things like that. So there are sellers on here who are selling very expensive jewelry and very expensive dolls and very fancy antiques. And then there's just plain old vintage selling just fine as well. Okay, so let's go back to talking about my feelings on the changes, and I'll give you my feedback. Okay, so my thoughts on the change and selling on Ruby Lane in general. I have enjoyed selling on Ruby Lane, so I am staying for now. You know, we never know what the future will hold, right? But I do agree that Ruby Lane maybe could have done this a little more gently. Like we mentioned earlier, they could have maybe just dropped the rebate. They could have kept the rebate, like upped it to $45, kept the rebate, and so you're still only just paying $20 a month. Maybe do that for like a year and then make another change. I don't know. I don't know what would make people happy. Maybe giving a little more notice, because some people are like, they're definitely gone before June 1st. And so they need time to move their items onto another platform. I was reading one commentary or one discussion about if you're leaving Ruby Lane, where are you going? And people don't know where to go, right? So they left some of these other sites, eBay, Etsy, because there was things they didn't like about it. Some are going back to Etsy, and other people are like, I wouldn't do that if I were you, because it's gotten worse over there. It's more of a Wild West. You know, and there's exceptions to every site. There's exceptions to, some people love eBay, some people hate eBay, some people love Etsy, some people hate Etsy, right? So you kind of have to see what fits for you. I tend to look at my reselling business as a whole. I've been trying to do that more and more. So $45 a month is, am I correct? $540 a year. Did I do that math correctly? So can my reselling business as a whole, can it absorb $540 in a year? Yes, it can. Do I like it? No, of course not. Like, I don't like shipping increases. I don't like packaging increases. I don't like, you know, eBay fee increases. But I can absorb that 540, at least for now. So would I be happy, say, if Depop did this? No, because I'd have like one Depop sale, 2 Depop sales a month at the most. And so I'm not going to pay $45 a month to get a couple little sales on there, but I have a track record with Ruby Lane of having consistent sales on there. So I'm willing to go ahead and make that investment into my Ruby Lane shop. And it actually makes me want to work harder at it, this change. I was talking to another Ruby Lane seller about that. So I have so much vintage. I have a lot of jewelry. I have a lot of things. What I'd like to do is really evaluate the things that have sold well in my shop. I have sold quite a bit of jewelry on there, even though there are a lot of jewelry sellers and a lot of competition. But there's a lot of buyers on there for vintage jewelry as well. And I had, right before they made this announcement, I was, you know, kind of into my jewelry, finding it, selling it again. And I thought, should I just make Ruby Lane like no brainer? This is just where I list my vintage jewelry. And then I was like, they made this change, and I was like, no, because I've sold kitchen stuff. I've sold kitschy decor stuff. I've just sold some random nonsense that's just vintage. And so I'm gonna keep it that way. I'm just gonna keep it as my open, you know, whatever I feel like would sell well there, I'll put there. We do sell some vintage on eBay. You've seen our sales on What Sold. We sell some vintage still on Etsy. My husband, he runs an Etsy shop, and you know, he doesn't give a ton of attention to it, but we do some cross posting from eBay to his Etsy shop, and some stuff surprises us and sells there. So, you know, we have a lot of choices. Like I said, it's a reselling business as a whole. And so this is just going to be one more expense that we're going to write off on our taxes. And, I'm going to try it out. So I'm going to make myself a listing goal. I don't know exactly what it is yet. I'm going to kind of see how many things I've been listing in the past. And I want to make a substantial like listing, like start out with maybe like 100 items, adding 100 items every month to Ruby Lane, and see how my sales go accordingly. You know, and then reevaluate. I'll give it through probably the end of the year. I'll give it till then and see as we get into, you know, end of summer, fourth quarter, things like that, see how we're really doing with Ruby Lane. So I will evaluate it again. I will give you an update in the future. Reselling isn't easy, guys. There's always changes. That's one thing about reselling. It never stays the same. Just when you think you've gotten used to a venue or way things are working or what people are buying, it changes. Okay, so you kind of have to adapt with it. So I think that's all I have to say about the change and about Ruby Lane for now. I hope this helped. I hope this helps you make a decision if you were looking into it. Leave me any questions down below. Like I said, I'm willing to do another video more about the nitty gritty again on Ruby Lane, but if y'all are like, forget it, it's too rich for my blood, I'm not doing it, then I won't worry about it so much. But feel free to subscribe. You can see my What Solds every week. You'd be able to see how well my Ruby Lane sales are doing through that as well, and the types of items that I've sold. Okay, I hope you guys are doing great, and we'll see you later on this week.